as we kick off HP, let's since we're talking to a lot of students, when you were, in elementary, middle school, what were you in high school? What were your interests?
Not studying. First of all, thanks for having me on this morning. I know it's early for you guys and for me. But to answer your question, I always liked writing. I liked the arts. I played guitar in high school. I wrote constantly. I liked science, but I really focused more on writing in English and the things that are in the arts, and didn't do much in math, which didn't serve me well ultimately. When I got to college, I kind of wanted to be an architect, part of my drawing and art background. And by the time I got to my junior year in college, I went to the architecture school and had this great portfolio. And they said, you can't do that. You have to have a math background. You have to have some engineering classes, which I hadn't done in my first 2 years of school. And I said, well, why? I draw really well. And they said, well, because if you want to design big buildings, skyscrapers, you've got to know how wind velocity affects the way that building will move. You have to look at load structures. You have to look at the mechanics of getting concrete up from the ground to the sky, which was a real wake-up call. It was the first time I really realized that science was kind of underlying this thing that I thought was an artistic endeavor. So I didn't become an architect. And after school, I played guitar professionally for a little while, a very little while. It's not a career I recommend to many people if you want to make a whole life out of it, but you can play your whole life. And I spent a lot of time in recording studios. And getting the right sound in a recording studio requires knowledge of microphones and amplifiers and recording consoles. And I would always turn to whoever was engineering that day, and they would say, oh, we can get you that sound, or we can do this or that. And they would twiddle some knobs and move some microphones and do all kinds of stuff. And I would say, that's a great sound, that's what I wanted. How did you do that? And they would always say, oh, it's an art. And I realized after doing it for a couple of years, it's not an art. There's a science to placing a microphone and being able to get a sound that you want, because it measures the frequencies. It takes into account the decibel levels and really the response of the guitar or the instrument that you're playing. So those were two real wake-up calls to me through high school, college, and then shortly thereafter, that even though I felt like I was kind of doing artsy things, there was really a core of all the things we talk about in STEM underlying all those. And as all of that kind of morphed into a career as a writer, which I'd started out enjoying in grade school and high school, I sought to find the science inside the things that I was interested in. So I was interested in writing about the human brain. I was interested in writing about blood, both as kind of a gory, splattery, horror movie kind of thing, but also the science behind it. I've gone on to write books about a lot of other things, sea monsters, there's a science behind that. Chocolate and the science that goes into creating chocolate. All those things, the math, the technology, all of it is easily extracted from things that don't appear naturally to be STEM-centric. They appear to be art kind of pursuits. So in the years since I've been a writer, I've really found that exploring all those things STEM is kind of a natural extension of exploring those kind of art worlds.
It's a great way to explain it as well, because I think some people feel they either have to be an artist or a scientist, right, that those two worlds cannot coexist. And I think what we do here at the Orlando Science Center is show people that science is in all things, and you're living proof of that.
Well, I think you can extract it from everything. One of the things after becoming a writer that I branched out into was designing two museum exhibits, one of which is the artificial intelligence exhibit here. But I also did one based on my interest in guitars. And I had a guitar collection and knew other people who had guitar collections. Not a big collection, a few guitars. And we put together the same week this exhibit, and we wanted to take it around to different science centers and museums. And I said, well, we need to see the science I said, oh, well, we'll just extract the science from the guitar. So we went and in the exhibit, we talk about how pickups on an electric guitar pick up the string sound and make music from that. How it produces sound through an amplifier, and how waves are produced by electrical signals going to an amplifier tone. How you measure decibels. So we ended up being able to turn that into a science exhibit, even though on the face of it, it's, wow, it's just a lot of cool guitars, and so-and-so played this, and so-and-so played that. We were really able to extract the science out of that. And it's a little easier here in artificial intelligence, where you hit all of the STEM things. Anybody who wants to get into AI is going to have an appreciation for science, technology, engineering, and math, just to figure out how to make machines behave like humans.
I think the guitar exhibit is that great example of where art and science intermingle, and that did premiere right here at Orlando Science Center back in 2011.
We like Orlando.
Yeah, we had a great time with that exhibit, and we're thrilled to be the world premiere site here for artificial intelligence, your mind in the machine. Is there something about Orlando that makes you want to premiere exhibits here?
I do like the people, I like working with the people in Orlando. Actually, this museum in particular, and in the guitar exhibit, has been to almost 30 different museums over the last 9 years. We found that here in Orlando, this particular science center, you get to kind of experience all the things that we're talking about, STEM, but also a little bit of history and a little bit of art. You can make things in their makerspace called the Hive. And so my interest in the arts and extracting science from that is also part of the Science Center here, which is kind of my way of saying thanks for doing it. But it's a really unique science center in terms of all the things that it covers, and the fact that you can get natural history and animals in addition to, like blood. As I said, I wrote a book about blood and sea monsters. That's here as well. A lot of science centers don't focus on an expanded range of science. They just kind of focus on one thing. So I like it here.
Well,
and the weather's good
yeah,
usually.
and we like you, and we're thrilled that you're here. And I think it's just really exciting that you've kind of had this career that's touched on many different topics. And before you became an author and before you became an exhibit creator, you were a young person with some specific interests and starting out. What was that first job for you, and was that the job that led to a career?
No. My first job out of college, because it was in a recession, not the recent one, but longer, was delivering pizzas. Even though I had a college degree, there wasn't a lot of jobs out there because I was a writer. I graduated from college as a writer. And when I finally did get a job after a few months of delivering pizzas, I went to work for an advertising agency. And I wrote copy for ads. Everything that you read and see, billboards, magazines, TV ads, somebody has to write those, and I did that. And I went from an ad agency to a small computer company where I worked in their creating their advertising. And so I already had a little bit of interest in computers, and this is before personal computers were actually invented. So think way, way, way back. And my dad had worked on computers that were room-sized type computers back in the 1960s and 70s. So when I went to work for a computer company, I had a little understanding of computers, but I wrote about them for the ads. And actually, because computers require a basic understanding of how they work to write about them, I used that also as another way to extract kind of the engineering. How are these things made? How are they put together? What's the science behind them? And after writing enough advertising, I actually ended up getting a call from a magazine saying, we've read your stuff and you seem to understand the science and the technology behind this. We should be interested in writing an article. I said, sure, that's what I kind of went to college to do. And they ended up hiring me to write about a lot of different kinds of technology. And eventually, I'd heard about artificial intelligence. I started really writing about that. And I was one of the first people in the country, which makes me really old, to write about artificial intelligence. And here we are all these years later. it kind of diverges back into the guitar thing for a minute. You know, you can pick one career and really think it's going to be your career, and then it might change. You might run into different ideas that you want to pursue, or meet different people and you like what they're doing, or the economy changes and you do something different. AI was really popular back in the late 80s and early 90s, and so I was writing about it for about 10 years. And the first wave of AI, as we call it, basically disintegrated. All the money from companies dried up. Computers weren't fast enough to make it work. And so the industry burned out, and to be quite honest, I did a little bit too at the same time. It's like 10 years of doing this, and now it ended up going away. And I had managed to at least write a few articles about music and technology, and how synthesizers have become popular, and how it's being used for recording, and the importance of having an understanding of science and technology when using a new recording system, using your laptop for a recording system, or to create all kinds of sounds and sound samples. And hold on just a second. I'm being asked to pause a second.
You're going to talk a little bit.
Oh, you need to check. Should I pull this closer?
You can, but it's just also picking up the.
Okay.
So just while they're
I'm going to lean in here, so it's a little more intimate. And so, you know, after writing about technology, I was writing about the technology that was being used in synthesizers and all kinds of recording. And a guitar magazine actually had asked me to write about whether or not technology would ever be used in guitars. So I told you earlier I wanted to be a professional guitarist, and had been for a little bit, but it gave me the perfect opportunity to say, okay, well now I can write for guitar magazines. I had the entree into the science background. Now they went a little bit about the technology that goes into guitars, how's that going to work, what's the future going to be like. And for a long time I transitioned into just writing about guitars. And I did that for 7 or 8 years. And because of that, I was able to kind of create the contacts that allowed me to create the guitar exhibit. So in a way, it's all kind of come back to science and understanding how science, technology, engineering, and math underscore all these other interests, and then taking advantage of them and, you know, pursuing things that I want to do with my life.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up, because we get quite a bit here at the Science Center. People come, you know, and as you said, we've got a lot of different exhibits and experiences. Families, teens, adults come, have a really good time, and they're like, well, I really like the Science Center, but I'm not really a science person. You know, there seems to be this intimidation sometimes when you talk about science, but when you break STEM down, STEM is really just, you know, it's a series of essential skills. You know, it's problem solving, it's critical thinking, it's creativity, it's collaboration and communication, and these skills are important for success in no matter what career you go into. And so I'm glad to see how you're using it. We've got some questions coming up, and again, if you want to ask questions, just hit the question function. So here's our first question.
How much math is behind AI?
How much math is behind AI?
Good question. It's all math. It's completely math. It's very complex math. AI, a long time ago, when I was talking about it in the 80s and 90s, a lot of it was logic programming. So it was things like if-then, where you had to program in, if a car is not running, and if the carburetor is clogged, then replace the filter. You would have to program in those rules for every kind of AI application you wanted to do. You had to program in every move that it could make during a game of chess. Now we have what's called neural networks, and a lot of variations in neural networks. And the neural networks are all mathematical algorithms. They're algorithms that use mathematical equations. And an algorithm is really just an instruction for a computer to follow these equations. So a neural net, which, as I said, really underlies AI in all its forms today, or most of its forms today, is built on the structure of the human brain. So if you think of neurons in the brain, and how they're connected using synapses. And you can have all these connections and they're firing in different ways. Neural networks are a software version of that created in mathematics, where you have little points of data that start interacting with each other and create a network that's very similar to the brain's neural network. And they process information in all those different ways, like synapses. So, sure, I can.
Yeah, one of the fun things about being at the Science Center is
Would it
we can
help?
get a little loud. So thanks for bearing with us.
There's fun stuff.
A lot of fun stuff going on.
So neural nets, though, they're programmed mathematically, and what they do is they create weights of importance, how one piece of information works with another, and that's all controlled by math. Computers are very literal things. They run on mathematics, and so if you want to get into AI at a really deep level, beyond coding, you need to understand how some of those equations work. And quite honestly, I wish I knew more about how those things work, but having missed it through college and spending all my time doing other things, I have a basic understanding of it, but to have a really good understanding of it, I would need to spend more time. Yes.
Does AI use JavaScript?
Not so much. Right now, most of the AI that's being used, I mean, you can almost, Bill Gates once said, Bill Gates, who founded Microsoft and is one of the world's richest people, said once upon a time in the 1980s, oh, I could program AI in BASIC, which everybody laughed, and he couldn't. But it's evolved. Today, most AI is written in Python, but you can write it in anything. We have interactives here that are written in Android. We have things that run on Mac OS. We have a few Windows 10, believe it or not, applications. But at their core, Python seems to run the fastest, especially if you know your programming, because it works well with GPUs. So I hope that answers the question. All right.
Can robots feel emotion?
Can robots feel emotion?
Only in the movies. iRobot, Terminator, Matrix. No, they can't. And robots, it's important to point out that robots are not AI. Robots have been around for a long time. They use them in auto manufacturing plants to do spot welding and painting. They use them in surgery for very detailed surgery as controlled by doctors. But robots are just machines that repeat the same process over and over. Unless you give them software that makes them intelligent, that allows them to perhaps respond to you. So let's say you put Siri or Alexa in a robot, then it would have some level of intelligence. But generally robots are just kind of machines that imitate human arms and hands. Do they feel emotions? Not yet. Will they ever? It's a really good question, because, and the best way I know how to answer it is a guy, a philosopher in the 1980s, said, asking if machines can think is like asking if submarines can swim. Submarines do everything that a swimming fish would do, but are they swimming? No. If a machine, a robot, is thinking and appears to be thinking, is it really doing what we're doing? And right now the answer appears to be no. In the future, could it change? Yes, perhaps as you guys grow up and get to be my age and older, it could happen. And that's what researchers are trying to create. But right now, it's like submarine swimming. It doesn't happen. You can ask Alexa how she's feeling, or ask Siri if she's mad at you, and they'll give you clever answers, but ultimately they're just answers that they're pulling from a database of words. They don't really know what they're replying to.
That leads into the next question. Can a robot function with a human brain? And can a robot arm fully work in a human?
The answer to the first question is no. You can take almost every organ out of a human body except the brain. You can replace the heart, you can replace the liver or the kidney, you can repair the liver, you can repair intestines, you can repair lungs. You cannot swap out the brain. Almost everything else can be artificially recreated or kept alive, not the brain. We just have the brain. I think it says it behind us. Your brain is the most complex system in the universe with over 1 trillion neural net connections. Over 1 trillion. That's, I think it's 12 zeros. Science understands 100% of how AI works because we developed AI, but science barely understands how the brain works. It's just it's the most complicated thing in the universe. So putting a brain outside of the human body into a machine is not possible yet. Really interesting thought experiment. On the other hand, there are researchers, there are scientists who have developed prosthetic limbs, which ultimately can be extended to robot arms, in theory, that can be controlled by the brain. And basically what they do is they will take the electrical impulse signals that come from your neurons down through your nervous system to your arm, and then hardwire them into either the prosthetic or a robotic arm, allowing your brain to actually control that movement. So it's being used for prosthetics now, and it's only a matter of time before you can kind of hardwire yourself into a robotic arm. Matter of time meaning not tomorrow, not next week, but in years to come.
Do you have any AI that you can show them?
We do actually. We can show them the face capture. Is the fox on that screen over there? No, on the screen in front of you. Is it on? We can show them that. You want to go for a walk? Because we're going for a walk. It's going to get loud. Move this out of the way. So one of the big things in AI, or one of the most popular uses for AI right now, is motion or facial recognition. And that's used not only to identify you when you post your face on Facebook. You tag it with your name so that the AI knows it's you. And if you get posted or tagged somewhere else, it's compiling a database of your face. So I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but going on Facebook and somebody might have posted your picture and nobody tagged it, but the AI knew it was you because you've had your picture scanned enough times by Facebook's AI. So facial recognition is a really big deal in AI. Surveillance, identity security, and a number of things. But a really cool example is using it in film and animation, where just motion capture, which you're probably familiar with, which is a lot of green screen stuff. But to do it in real time, where you have the ability to have the machine map your face. So it scans your nose, your eyes, your mouth, and then applies it to another character or another person. And that's actually a problem going forward, because if you can put your face on another person's face, that's called deep fakes. And people are concerned that your identity could be used to impersonate somebody else without your knowledge. That's the downside. The fun stuff is things like this. We have this fox raccoon looking thing up here and a camera. And we have a computer tucked in the back, which is running Python for whoever asked it earlier. And this will scan my face. And if you look right over here in this little window here, the camera is picking up my eyes, my nose, my mouth, my jawline, all the features of my face, and mapping it to the character of this raccoon fox. So when I look, like if I open my eyes really big, if I open my mouth like this, it will follow my movement. So I can shake my head back, forth, up, down, kind of doing all kinds of stuff that allows the machine to translate what I'm doing to another character. That has a huge potential ramification in the entertainment industry, where you can start putting one character's face on another. You might not even need actors for some things. But as I talk here, I actually you can see it's trying to follow my mouth and talking to you and doing all kinds. So it follows me. So that it takes AI to do that this quickly. 10 years ago, there were still programming the computer to do each stage of this.
How many robots have you created that could change how we live?
Well, I've never created a robot, and I don't use them. robots change a lot of the way you live, um, in ways you don't know. Are we going back to sit down, or are we going to stand? We can just stand here. Oh, somebody asked about, we were talking about math. Um, yeah, is there, we have, I don't know if we have it on here. Maybe it's in a different one. It's on a different one. Oh, we'll talk about that in a minute. I've never created any robots, but robots have changed our lives in ways that you probably don't appreciate, which is assembly lines, cars, um, iPhones are created on one of the biggest robotic assembly lines in the world over in China. And somebody has to create those robots in order to put together an iPhone, in order to create all those bazillions of pieces and parts that go into not only the phone itself, but going into making it a final product. If you're asking about robots that are, sort of like, we have this semi-robot over here in the corner, I don't have any personal robots. Nobody I know does. Alexa kind of serves that purpose for a lot of people, even though she's not a robot. And I think Alexa as an AI and Siri is changing our lives, because we expect to maybe not even, go outside and check the weather to see if it's raining. A lot of times you just say, hey, Alexa, what's the temperature outside? Is it raining? She says it's 80 degrees. No, you're like, okay, I don't even need to check. So we're relying on AI to do that for us, even if it's not in robotic form.
Can animal limbs be available in the AI industry? Wait, I'm sorry, I think I read that wrong. Can an animal limb be replaced with AI?
No, we've never, it's funny, we talked about brains earlier. Back in the 1970s, a scientist actually did swap brains between dogs. A dog only lived for 5 days, but that was the only time anybody ever tried that. Animal limbs, aren't high priority in terms of where technology is relative to AI. Certainly veterinarians, huge demand. I mean, I live in New York City, and it seems like everybody has a dog in New York City. So veterinarians and the skills that go into being a medical doctor are very important. But as far as AI, we're spending so much time trying to create things that apply to humans and behave human or like humans, that we really haven't done a lot that affects live animals. Now, there are robot dogs, and I highly recommend, if you get a chance, go on YouTube, look up a company called Boston Dynamics Robot Dogs, and you will see how amazing the technology has gotten, where robots can imitate dogs and look, well, actually they're scarier than dogs, but they behave just like dogs. So that's kind of the closest animal machine crossover we have.
What is the latest creation? What is your latest creation, and what problem will it solve?
What's the earliest?
What is your most recent, your latest creation?
Oh, my creation. See, now, my creations are books and exhibits.
Perfect timing.
Oh, the last book I wrote, let's see, I'm not even sure. I think it was chocolate. Now, we're talking about STEM, right? Mm-hmm. My publisher came to me and said, okay, you've written about sea monsters, which we basically looked into giant squids and whales and octopi. Actually, it's octopuses, it's not octopi. And I'd done one on blood, I'd done one on the brain, I'd done artificial intelligence. Excuse me. And he said, well, what haven't you written about that you'd like to write about? And I said, well, chocolate. Everybody likes chocolate. I eat chocolate whenever I can. So can you make an interesting book on chocolate? So he said, yeah, I'll research chocolate and find out what's interesting about it. And the thing that I found out, as I have with all my books, is that there's a huge amount of science behind chocolate. The cocoa bean, which grows only in a certain part of the world, is about the size of a football, but it can only be pollinated by a midge. And a midge is smaller than, we call them no-see-ums up in New England. It's about the size of a head of a pin, but it's got wings that beat 1,000 times a second, 1,000 times a second. You can't even blink 3 times a second. So this little midge pollinates these big cocoa pods, and every cocoa seed that comes out of that is ground up to make chocolate. But chocolate is one of the hardest compounds to create, because it has over 900 different chemical combinations in it by the time you've ground it down, roasted it, heated it, mixed it with milk, mixed it with sugar. It's an incredible science. It took people almost 300 years to figure out how to make milk chocolate. And candy bars, the way we know them, have only been around about 100 years because nobody could create solid chocolate that wouldn't either melt or that didn't taste really bitter. If you had really dark chocolate, grind it up into a powder, that's what people had for chocolate up until the early 1800s. So the development of chocolate, milk chocolate, ended up being a scientific race between a number of people, Milton Hershey being probably the most famous, that ended up being one of science's greatest consumer creations.
What jobs are available in the AI industry?
Lots. Yeah, we start with programmers, and programmers obviously are the people who create the core code for computers themselves. But if you go back further than that, you have the people who are creating the mathematics that will be used for that code. You have people that have to come up with the ideas. What can we use AI for? Can we use it to diagnose medical conditions? Can we use it to read x-rays? Can we use it to predict heart failure in old people? All of those things are actually being worked on now. So you've got a number of directions that people getting into AI have come from. So you've got the idea people, you've got the math people, you've got the coding and programming people, then you've got the people who actually have to make it work in the real world. So it's amazing. In the last 5 years, I think I've heard more ads on the radio for, now hiring AI experts for such and such, or if you want to work in artificial intelligence. It's pretty much, as we like to say in the old days, it's like the Wild West. People are able to do all kinds of things, and almost every big company is getting into AI in some way.
What impact do you see the AI industry having on the job market?
Very, very good question. I have to start by saying that any new technology scares people that they're going to lose their jobs. And the first biggest example of that was the Industrial Revolution. So about 200 years ago, people made clothes and shoes and textiles by hand. They used looms that we wove back and forth, but people made them in factories by hand. With the invention of the automated loom, you didn't need people to sew everything. You could actually have these automated looms that created big sheets of textiles and made shoes, and all of a sudden people thought they were out of jobs. But it turned out you needed someone to program those looms. You needed somebody to maintain the looms. You needed somebody to make sure that the designs going into the looms were actually workable. You had to have somebody check for quality coming off the looms. So it created a whole bunch of other jobs that were different than the weaving jobs they replaced. AI is going to be similar in that way. You're going to have people who perhaps simple routine jobs, especially like customer service call jobs. You call and you get a machine and it tries to answer your questions. That's kind of already happening. Travel agents, if you go on a lot of travel sites, you don't really need a travel agent to program your trip. A lot of that's done through AI. But at the same time, more people taking trips means more people working in hotels, more people working for the airlines, more people doing things that surround you taking that trip. So yes, some jobs, and again, initially there'll be routine jobs, will be replaced, but it will open up opportunities around those kind of jobs as more people take trips, as more people need help in customer service.
What would happen if the AI system broke down? Could somebody reprogram things to do evil or bad things?
Yes, very good question. The biggest concern with AI, and if any of you have seen the Terminator, and the new one's coming out next month, I think. The Terminator is based on the fact that the machines end up taking over the world. We are a very, 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 very long way from that kind of stuff happening. But that doesn't mean that technology can't be used to, steal things, to ruin people's reputation. And it doesn't even take an AI to do that. I mean, you hear about passwords getting hacked and banks getting robbed even before AI. But people have started using AI, as I was talking about earlier with deep fakes. Just last week, there was a report that a bank in London had been defrauded of about $250,000 because some AI hackers had created a voice model that, should I stop doing
No,
that?
you're good. My wrists are good now.
Oh, sorry, we're still moving around here. This bank had been defrauded of about $250,000 because some AI hackers had essentially cloned the voice of the CEO of the company. They'd created a voice model that so accurately represented his voice that they used his voice as an AI, called executives within the company and told them to transfer money to an account. And they did. They said, "Oh, it's the boss calling. We've got to do what the boss says." Transferred $250,000. Boss said, "Why did you do that?" And they said, "You told us to." The insurance company found out, no, they'd been hacked by these guys who had created an AI voice modeling system. So yes, it can be used for bad things. Anything can be used for bad things. You just hope that it doesn't get used by the bad people.
So are human beings behind AI? Whenever you hear of, Alexa or Siri, those are all
No.
programmed by humans, or?
Oh, well, every AI has been programmed by a human. And every AI has to be trained. So for instance, when Alexa responds to your voice, Alexa has heard millions of times, "Hey Alexa," or "I need to know," and is able to recognize the voice patterns that you have. So let's say I say, "Hey Alexa, who's the singer for the Foo Fighters?" Alexa will hear my voice. She will hear singer, Foo Fighters, and who. She will scan the internet, find a Wikipedia article, a band website or whatever, and find out, okay, singer and Foo Fighters matches most often with the name Dave Grohl. So she'll come back and go, the singer for Foo Fighters is Dave Grohl. Now, sometimes she gets it wrong because she's scanning different things. But because she knows where to scan and there are millions of pieces of information to scan, she can do that without any human intervention. But the human intervention had to take place during the training part.
Is programming AI a career choice, or can I do it as a hobby?
You can do both. There's an online site called GitHub, which you guys are probably familiar with, that has lots and lots of AI applications that people have created and have loaded up there that are public domain. You can use them. Even Google has put some things up there that you can download and try yourself on your laptop or on little Raspberry Pis. But you can do it either way. I think it's a career path of the future, yeah. But if it's something you want to do for fun, there are plenty of hobbyists.
How is AI related to gaming?
AI, the resurgence in AI came about because of gaming. AI, as I told you, kind of died in after the mid 90s. But starting about 6 or 7 years ago, researchers started using GPUs, which are the graphics processing units that you have for games. NVIDIA makes them. If you want a really tricked out game console, you tend to put an NVIDIA card in there. And what they found out was that the way a video game works, when you have to take the background and have the background refresh itself every second, is a lot like the way neural networks work, because you've got so many millions of data points that have to be processed. It doesn't work well with just a standard computer, which tends to work on one thing at a time. A GPU, as used for gaming, works on so many things all at once. It does seem like neural nets. They're working on so many things all at once. And so the gaming industry really helped fuel the rise of AI by kind of showing the way using the technology behind gaming. So, humans have always tried to make things in their own image, and today it's robots, but even in Greek mythology, there was a metal robot giant, not called a robot, but a metal giant called Talos, that protected the island of Crete from invaders, and he was 200 feet tall, but he was made of metal. That goes back a couple thousand years. You go back 200 years, we have Frankenstein, which Mary Shelley, an 18-year-old woman, created, and it's become perhaps the most popular idea of creating a creature, an intelligent creature that resembles humans.
So it's always been around in fiction, but it was around 1956 that the first computer researchers started saying, well, we have this new technology called computers. Can we get it to think? And so really since 1956, the idea of trying to create thinking machines has become popular. But again, it's really only been in the last 5, 6, 7 years that it's been workable.
Do 3D printers count as a robot?
Yes, it uses robotic devices. You know, the movement of a 3D device going back and forth, creating something, that kind of movement would be considered a robotic movement. But because it's an actual appliance, I wouldn't call it a robot per se.
Those are all of my questions for now.
Okay.
Oh, yours popped up.
HP, what fascinates you the most about artificial intelligence?
I think the idea that you have something as basic to what we do, especially in the STEM world, as mathematics, and that you can take mathematics and then science, and you can engineer it all into the idea of having a machine or a piece of software or device that seems to actually resemble a human, and that it really boils down not to giving it a soul or a mind or consciousness, but it comes down to how have you manipulated the math to make this work.
And what inspired you to turn all your ideas and information about AI into this brand new museum exhibit?
I think there's a lot of misconception about what AI is. People tend to think it's, again, the Matrix or iRobot or some android who's got the idea that it's going to take over the world or control humans. And people get really scared by that. At the same time, I don't think people realize that every day of their lives, when they're using Siri and Alexa or Google Maps or Spotify and Pandora, which are creating playlists using AI, that is actually an artificial intelligence that surrounds us. So the approach that we've taken with this exhibit is to make sure that people see, yeah, it is stuff that we already have around us, and here's how it works. Here's some stuff you don't often see around you, like the motion capture or translating text. We have a machine that will, if you hold a Russian page of a Russian book in front of it, it'll translate into English while you watch. Things like that are also being used by companies and governments, but then we also want to pitch the idea that there's a long ways to go, but there's a lot of stuff we have to consider as we get closer to the idea of a Terminator or a scary future, because we can control, hopefully, the fact that it will be, well, it's not a fact, control the direction of AI and hopefully make it beneficial and not scary.
What do you hope people take away from this exhibit experience?
Almost exactly what I just said. I hope you come through it and you realize that AI is not scary. It's not like it is in the movies. We're not even close to that yet. But that it is something that's helping us with the things that we take for granted. Again, like driving and using Google Maps or working with customer service online. But also the fact that there is a future in AI that's kind of wide open, and that people can explore it and come up with their own ideas of what AI might be.
Any similarities between writing a book and creating an exhibit?
Yes, a lot. They're both very time consuming. They're oftentimes labors of love and length. Writing is a very solitary thing. You do a lot of research online. When I first started writing books, there was no online, so I'd have to go to libraries, which are still great places, but online technology, being able to send information back and forth to people who are researching the stuff that I'm researching or creating the stuff that I'm researching is really good for me as a writer. Museums tend to be, since we're bringing it to people like you out there, we have to be more aware of the things that are going to work in terms of communication for a large group. So we need feedback from people as to does this work? Do you find this interesting? Do you find it engaging? You want to go to a museum, and you don't want to go just to have this kind of boring afternoon of like, I'm being dragged here. You want to have fun, and you want to be engaged. You want to find stuff that's interesting. So you do that by working with other people who have their own ideas about what can make something better and more appealing to a wide group of people.
So we have a lot of high schools on. Do you have any suggestions on what they should do as they're beginning to explore what kind of career opportunities are out there?
Well, certainly looking at the job market. It's shocking. Just if you Google, everything you do on Google is AI, by the way. All the searches that Google does are all AI. Because there's billions and billions of pages on the internet. Google doesn't, somebody's not sitting on the other end going, oh, you look for this, here it is. It has to search billions and billions of pages in order to get you an answer very quickly. So that said, you look up artificial intelligence and then look up jobs in corporate, and you will find hundreds and hundreds of thousands of companies that are looking for people in various roles of AI. They want people to promote AI. They want people to come up with ideas for AI. They want people to program AI. Some of the best jobs in the world right now are people who have math degrees and understand AI and can go into these large companies and say, sure, I understand the math. I can do the work. So there's looking at what's out there that ties into your particular interest is as simple as Googling the terms.
You mentioned before, AI is not like movies like iRobot or The Terminator. Are there movies out there that get AI right?
There are a few. I think Her, that had Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson, where basically a gentleman kind of falls in love with his version of Siri. And I think that more and more people talk to Siri and Alexa, the more they're going to form relationships with them. A long time ago, there was a movie called Colossus, the Forbin Project, which pitched AI as being a way for computers to talk to each other, but they were programmed by the wrong people. And so it's just computers, it's not robots, but it shows how computers affect what we do. War Games was kind of similar to that too. But by and large, most AI, the Matrix, iRobot, the Terminator, that stuff is, again, if you live long enough to see it, I'll be amazed, but it's certainly a long way off.
Do you think that movies, books, pop culture influences the development of new technology?
I think that science fiction in all its forms, like you just said, movies and films, is a really good way to be exposed to science. As I was saying, when I was a kid, I wrote a lot, I read a lot, and I loved science fiction. And that informed me to some degree of how science did fit with the world around me, even though it was fiction, even though it was Star Wars, Star Trek, Iron Man kind of stuff. You could see how it might work in the future. So following those things does make you think about what the opportunities might be in the future. The guy who wrote 2001: A Space Odyssey actually games better than any human being in the world. But those same AIs don't know the difference between a gorilla and a guitar. No AI has a consciousness. It only follows the mathematics it's given and can produce results based on that. So you've got a chess playing AI. That chess playing AI cannot answer questions like Siri. Siri cannot play chess. So it's really important to understand that each AI is very, very focused, and we call that narrow AI. The idea that we'll someday have R2D2 or C3PO rather is something that's called general intelligence. And that's what everybody's working for, an AI that will understand things in context, that will be able to appreciate any changes in its environment. One of my favorite stories about neural nets is they trained a neural net how to identify different kinds of cars. And once it identified these kind of cars, they would show it new versions of the same car, different colors. It always got it right. when they turned the pictures upside down, it always identified the car as a wastebasket. So it couldn't recognize changes in its environment that were so strong. You would be able to figure that out. I could show you a picture of a Chihuahua and a picture of a blueberry muffin. And if you look at them really closely, they look really similar, or a Dalmatian and chocolate chip cookie ice cream. You look at that, the texture is very similar, but you know that one is not a Dalmatian and the other is not a chocolate chip cookie ice cream scoop. A computer doesn't know that. It only knows how to identify certain things. So you have to realize that there's no consciousness. It doesn't learn, it doesn't think, it's not aware of its surroundings like any child is, but it does perform mathematical equations brilliantly.
I've got a question for you. We got a couple minutes left. It said, we are developing an AI lab within one of our classes for student explorations. We are starting with Echo-Doc coding programs and Spark Fun robots. Could you give us any suggestions for an additional project?
Well, I don't know how deep you're going into it. The thing that I've recommended to most people is something I mentioned earlier. If you go to GitHub and look up artificial intelligence, there are lots of public domain programs that you can download. I would try something as simple as facial recognition, which again, you can find examples of on GitHub. Facial recognition will show you immediately kind of how you're progressing, how well it interprets eye movements, mouth movements. And as you get into that, facial recognition can also be used to interpret emotion. It can see that you're smiling, that means you're happy. You can see that you're frowning, it means that you're sad. As you're pursuing that particular project, you can start adding those things and see how each iteration of the AI evolves from just that motion capture we showed you earlier to being able to interpret what it's seeing.
You got about 3 minutes left if there's anything.
Final thoughts?
Do you have any advice for any students that might be thinking about going into AI? If, like, maybe some things that they could start preparing themselves for? Or...
You know, get a look, watch, and I know this is probably already part of your daily lives. Go to YouTube, look up artificial intelligence videos. Seriously, there are some great videos of people doing some amazing things. We found actually one of our programmers on YouTube. He had developed a program that shows you what a neural net sees. Basically took a camera and you could watch the neural net scan a face, and each element of the face the neural net reacts to. So it looks at a curve and looks at another curve, and then it looks at a kind of a round shape, and finally decides that's an eye. Then it sees a curve here, but it sees a horizontal line, decides that's a mouth. So videos like that will, and the guy who did it ended up saying, well, here's where you can get my code, here's where you can try it yourself. So it may sound rather random, but YouTube is kind of like the library of AI. So if you go type in neural nets or how AI works, you'll find people doing really cool things, and they will point you to very specific things like their code or to applications they've developed. I will give you one last thing that if you want to just see how AI can work beyond Siri and Alexa, there's a program called Seeing AI. It's online. You can download it for any of your phones. It's free, which makes it even better. Seeing AI was developed initially for blind people, but it's been expanded so that you can use it to interpret scenes around you. When you hold it, it will say, I'm looking at two women holding computers here. And it will tell me the color of your clothes. It will also interpret handwriting. It will, it can tell the denomination of dollar bills. It will also guess your age. So it's a free app that will show you some of the things that we're exploring in greater depth here, but it'll give you an idea of the AI that's possible in the future and things that you might want to pursue that take AI beyond that.
We've got the exhibit premiering on Saturday, September 14th, and it'll be on display here at Orlando Science Center and included with your admission, or free if you're a Science Center member. So we encourage everyone to come and check it out. Anything you want to say about the exhibit before we wrap up?
Just come and have fun. Learn a little bit about AI. You'll find some things that you didn't know before about yourself, probably. See if you can find the anomalies that we've hidden around the exhibition. see if you can guess the illusions that AIs can see and you can't see, and spend some time exploring the world of artificial intelligence.